Welcome to this month's webinar in the series Sustaining Outstanding Analytics Organizations, sponsored by the Informs Practice section. We have as our guest today, Dr. Carl Kemp from the Intel Corporation. However, before I share his impressive credentials, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about the practice section. So I need to share my screen real quickly. The practice section is a maybe a little known sometimes group within Informs, but it has a very important role. For example, our main goal is to support and help advance the practice of analytics, actually the root of operations research and management science in the practice environment. We have some very important activities which we lead. For example, the Franz Edelman Award, the most prestigious practice award that we have, as well as other prestigious prizes like the Daniel Wagner Prize, the Smith Prize. We also sponsor two webinars. One, the Applied Analytics Success Stories. Our next webinar will be in October, but we don't know the exact date and time yet. So we will post in the chat where you can find that information. And of course, the next webinar in this series, which we have a date, November 17th, still closing on our person. I also want to mention a very interesting event every month, the last Friday of the month, which is basically a networking happy hour where we get together and talk about things we're interested in. And I strongly recommend you consider that. Of course, we have a practice track section at the annual meeting. And a newsletter. So there's a lot of activities, and we hope everybody who's listening to this will be interested in that all of these activities. So I want to get started. Carl is the third, will spend a third of his time discussing analytics at Intel. What are the challenging business issues and how he and his colleagues have met those challenges. Carl and I will spend the next third in a conversation about analytics and how their team operates within the company. And then we'll open up for questions. Carl is a senior fellow and director of decision engineering at Intel Corporation. Since 1987, he has been responsible for designing and implementing decision support systems for many Intel organizations, from product design to factory operations, from equipment and materials procurement through supply chain logistics. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering, an IEEE fellow, and a fellow of Informs. His Intel team has won the Informs Prize, Wagner Prize, the Edelman Award, and Carl has served as research adjunct at Arizona State, Stanford, and North Carolina State Universities, co-authoring over 175 publications and co-editing 3 books. And if that isn't enough, prior to joining Intel, he worked in some fascinating areas. Formula One motor racing for Ferrari, cinematic special effects on the movie Superman, and NASA space station automation for McDonnell Douglas. He holds degrees in chemistry, physics, and applied mathematics, and participated in postdoctoral research in computer science and artificial intelligence. I'm very happy to introduce Carl, and he'll take it from here.
Thanks very much for that kind introduction, and thanks everybody for attending this morning. I hope we'll have a useful and interesting discussion. So as Arnie said, I've suggested it might make more sense. The answers to the question might make more sense if I spend a few minutes showing you the projects that we work on, so that you know what we do. So when we start talking about how we do it, it'll make a little more sense. As Arnie said, our group was founded by Craig Barrett when he was in charge of manufacturing in August of 1987. So we've just celebrated our 34th year. The first 20 years we worked in manufacturing. As I said, Barrett led manufacturing when we started the group. Beneficial to us, as we'll probably talk about later, that he became CEO of the company. So we worked for 20 years on manufacturing and supply chain stuff. I'll show you a few of those projects. And then in 2007, we expanded our effort so that we were working in product design space as well. And I'll show you a few of those projects. Just to clarify what sort of things we do, we work on internal decision support systems. Nothing we do goes outside of the company, other than publications and presentations. We work on decision problems that are recurring. That is, decisions that need to be made daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly. We don't very often get involved in one-off decisions, and we're not the central OR group that builds the tools and runs them for other people. We actually are developing tools that we distribute out to the folks in the business unit who have the decision problem. Of course, for those 34 years, we've been following Barrett's direction. We work on problems that increase our revenues, decrease our costs, increase our velocity. Sometimes one of those three. Obviously, the favorite ones for me are the ones that hit on all three of those metrics, but faster, better, more integrated decisions. And I'll try to call out in a couple of the projects that I'm going to describe our efforts to figure out how to merge intuition and analytics. We don't build decision tools, we build decision support tools. And a number of the papers that I've written lately have been titled something like, intuition is unreliable, analytics is incomplete, we can't build perfect models. So how do we combine intuition and analytics to get a better answer than we could get with either one individually? And I'll touch on that. So now, quick as I can talk, examples of my favorite projects that we've done. So Intel is vertically integrated. We design and develop products. We in the orange box, going counterclockwise, we develop our manufacturing processes, Moore's law, and on the far left, we build the factories and develop them. That's perhaps a less trivial effort than you might imagine. Our factories are the cleanest spots on the face of the earth. And to follow Moore's law, the next factory in each case has to be cleaner than the previous factory. So if you're going to manufacture stuff, you have to have a factory that's running a process that's building products. So we do all those. And since we do this to make money, we have to run a supply chain as well. We're in the midst of the supply chain, so we buy stuff on one side, certainly manufacturing equipment and materials. When we're a little short when the market's hot and we're a little short on capacity, we subcontract some of our work to foundries. And of course, we contract logistics to actually deliver our stuff. On the other side, of course, we sell stuff. We sell stuff to manufacturers who use our products to build their products, to distributors, and of course to end users. You can go down this afternoon to your favorite electronics store and buy a Intel microprocessor in a box. And to do all that, on the far right, we have sales and marketing as well. I haven't included the support organizations here. This is the technical perspective. So of course, HR, IT, finance should have their blocks on here as well. We try to be as innovative as we can. And so in both product design and manufacturing process design, following Moore's law, and in manufacturing capability, we have long-term innovation pipelines. And of course, down in the execution part of the company, the operations part of actually running manufacturing and supply chain, we certainly do incremental innovation there. But of course, you can't turn off the factory for a week while you install your latest decision support tool. So on to 12 quick examples. I'm not going to dive into any of these because most of them have papers in the literature. If you're interested, super interested, you can go fish out the papers. But first set of projects we worked on were the ones that Barrett hired us for. That is to say, improving factory operations. So we developed WIP management policies, equipment maintenance policies, material release policies, et cetera, et cetera. And once we had succeeded at that, it became obvious to us that the factory wasn't quite designed to be run like we wanted to run it. So the next big set of projects were factory design. How many pieces of equipment should we buy? How should the factory be laid out, et cetera? And of course, if you know how the factory is designed and how you want to run it, the meat in the sandwich is how can you get it to produce revenue product as soon as possible. So we worked quite a bit on factory ramp, on getting the materials coordinated, the equipment delivered on time, the contractors who do the electricity and the plumbing, et cetera, coordinated. And the number on the right, we get division recognition awards when we succeed on a project. The people that we built it for give an estimate of how much the solution was worth, and we get credit for that for 1 year. Then whatever we did is standard practice, and if we want more credit, we have to invent the next tool in the sequence. So you see on the right the sort of summation of the division recognition awards we got for these first three. Then having looked at individual factories, we started to look across the factory network. So the next big set of projects were production planning for our multiple products in our multiple factories to hedge risk, what looked optimal there. And of course, if you're planning production, that is what to start into the factory, what to make, you very quickly arrive at an interest in inventory planning. So planning the inventory of work in progress, the inventory between factories, the inventory between the factory and our geo warehouses, between the geo warehouses and the customers. And in addition, inventory planning for spare parts for the equipment, et cetera, et cetera. That then led us into a very interesting area of supply chain control. We actually have a couple patents on how to use what was originally designed as a refinery controller with a few modifications to control our supply chain. That was sort of a interesting discussion of a lecture at ASU that a chemical engineering professor sat in on and came up after the fact and asked us why we were having so much trouble. And that then led us to a third body of work in those 20 years. Substrates on the left, substrates are what you would recognize as a chip, the little box with the pins sticking out of the bottom. So our fabrication facilities fabricate the chips, lay down the transistors and the circuits, and then our assembly factory saws the wafers up into individual chips and puts them in substrates so that they can be handled, inserted in printed circuit boards, physically protected, et cetera. Again, an interesting many-to-many problem. Lots of different substrates for our different products, for servers, for desktops, for laptops, for networking, for memory, et cetera. Lots of different substrate suppliers. So the many-to-many problem of each substrate supplier making multiple substrates and each substrate being made in multiple places. The additional business consideration there was an interesting one. We certainly, in our optimization there of ordering and purchasing, wanted a level playing field for the substrate vendors. We didn't want one vendor coming and saying, hey, you're giving me all the peanuts and you're giving my competitor all the high margin products. What's going on? Number 8 for equipment purchase is one of my favorite ones. It was a Edelman finalist. We invented a new kind of option. Most options are on purchase price. The options we invented were on lead time for getting the equipment. Some of our equipment is extremely complicated, and when we order it, it takes as much as 1.5 years to actually get it to put it in the factory. And forecasting our demand 1.5 years in advance to know how much equipment to buy was sort of tricky. So we built a relationship with our equipment vendors so that we could buy options to get things in half lead time. Again, the benefit there over on the right was 2.3 billion. So So they obviously over those 20 years we did lots and lots of projects, but these are my favorite 8, bringing benefit of something a little north of $6 billion to the company. But also those were the projects that won us the Informs Prize. A couple of those are Wagner finalists, a couple of those are Edelman finalists. And then we expanded to work on to go over into product world, and that turned out to be a really good idea, because the benefits to the company, the DRAs, the division recognition awards we got from product world were lots bigger than manufacturing world. One of the mainstays is our project and product portfolio management system, and I wish we had a different word than portfolio, because portfolio conjures up financial portfolios that we could set up today and change tomorrow if we want. This is multi-hundred people projects, and once you kick one off, you don't just randomly call them up and say, oh, we decided to not do that, where let's go do something else. The fundamental math problem here is, on one hand, we have lots of products we want to put into the market to make money. On the other hand, we have to engineer the products through projects, and we have to manufacture the products to get them into the market, and both those cost us money. There's never enough budget to run all the projects, and the real punchline, the key math problem here is that the projects are highly interrelated. That is to say, the results of one project impact another project, or the results of a project impact multiple products. So figuring out exactly which projects to run is a pretty interesting problem. And here's the first example of the analytics and intuition. On the left is the analytics. Product revenue, engineering costs, manufacturing costs go into the model, go into the optimizer that generates a set of solutions, usually, let's say for sake of argument, a dozen portfolios in an efficient frontier. And then we supply the folks with business intuition with all different flavors of reports. They can open up the portfolio, see what's in them, compare portfolios, force projects in that the optimizers kicked out, force projects out that the optimizers put in, run a whole bunch of what ifs. Aided by the fact that the optimizer runs in a couple minutes, so they can actually play out their intuition during the meeting. This has been very popular. This tool is used by all of our product groups to figure out their plan. Another very impactful project is, of course, supplying the inputs to that system. One of the main ones is figuring out how many engineering staff it's going to take to do the next project. This is more difficult than you might think, because in following Moore's law, each project gets more complicated. So you can do some machine learning on historical plan versus actual. How many heads did we plan? How many did it actually take? But given the project's getting more complicated, that's not quite so easy. The math here is really quite straightforward. Work equals people times time. The negotiations here, the what ifs that get played out with our tool here sometimes are really quite interesting to sit in on, because of course the work is specified by the business unit and the folks who are designing the product. The time is set by the sales and marketing folks who have a target to insert it in the market given what the customers want and what the competition's doing. And of course the engineers are caught between the rock on the left and the hard place on the right. And the negotiations that go back and forth here are fascinating to watch, and see all the what ifs that get played out in our tool to support the engineering data. The next piece, and I'm almost done, Arnie, I'll turn it back to you in just a minute. The next piece is the market model, forecasting the demand and the revenue of how much the product's going to be worth. And this project is a little different for us. We don't actually build the market models. We build the tool in which people build the market models. We use a technical term in the group that I'll use here. We found when we went out and looked around in the business that there were lots of cockamamie spreadsheets. I'm sure many of you on the line have seen cockamamie spreadsheets. That's either the spreadsheet that is masquerading as a database. I love those spreadsheets that have 20,000 lines in them storing data. Or it's a spreadsheet that the algorithm was developed by the person who had the job before the current person, or maybe even two rounds back. So we're always suspicious as to whether the person who's using the spreadsheet today actually knows what it does. So we replace these cockamamie spreadsheets with our tool called Rapid Visual Modeling Tool, which has a formal database, et cetera. So this is an interesting tool. It has more horsepower than a spreadsheet, but the audiences to use the tool are small in comparison with IT enterprise applications. So we sort of occupy that space in between. And that's where the product revenue comes from. It should go without saying that the manufacturing, we're connected into manufacturing, so the manufacturing cost comes from those other tools that we talked about. I'll close with two more real quickly. This one, product design, SKU stack development, is the one that actually won the Edelman prize. This one's interesting. This one's interesting to me from a mathematical standpoint, because of course we have stochastic demand, like most of you, hundreds of products, lots of markets, lots of customers, lots of competitors. So the demand is stochastic. What's particularly interesting in our case is the manufacturing process is also stochastic. Most of our microprocessors have billions of transistors on them. Again, following Moore's law, each of those transistors is composed of thousands of atoms, and nobody has yet come up with the atomic level copying machine. So we might start some wafers into the factory to make a 12-core microprocessor that runs at a particular speed and uses a particular amount of power. But what comes out the back of the factory is some distribution around that. Not all the cores on all the chips work. Some run faster than we thought. Some run slower than we thought. Some require more power, some less power, et cetera, et cetera. So the real interesting part for me of this Edelman winner was we found a way to take stochastic demand and stochastic supply and optimize our revenue, starting with the design process. So design for manufacturability, and then actually running manufacturing and the supply chain to realize that. Last foil. Of course, we do machine learning. What analytics group doesn't do machine learning? Our most successful stuff has been in manufacturing data, because of course our manufacturing facilities produce big data. You want to see big data. Ooh, we got big data, and clearly with a stochastic manufacturing process, you want to understand what you're making as soon as possible. So comparing inline data with end of line data and learning to understand what you're making, and in some cases find bugs in the manufacturing process. So lots of good applications there. I'll close by saying that in the 34 years we've been doing advanced analytics, I think at this point the summation of all of our division recognition awards is probably approaching $50 billion. And we've had some success outside as well, with what we think of as the three main practice awards: the Informs Prize, the Wagner Prize, and the Edelman. We've been fortunate to win all three. I don't think, from the data I've got, that there are very, very many companies that have won all three. And I think even less the same team in the same company winning all three. But of course, I have to be honest. I remember Arnie comes from IBM. It's still the case today that IBM is the world and Olympic champion. They've won the Informs Prize, the Edelman Prize, and at last count 3 Wagner Prizes. So we're still in the competition. IBM, we're coming for you. And with that, I'll turn it back to Arnie.
Wow. Obviously, Intel's a fascinating place, and a place where you found huge challenges to being analytics professionals. So that's amazing. What I'd like to do now is sort of steer the discussion a little bit more on the whole question of building an organization of the kind that this webinar is focused on organizations and how to sustain
Right.
them, how to build. And I didn't mention my name earlier. I'm just going to say quickly, I'm Arnie Greenland, and currently a professor of practice at University of Maryland Business School, though the prior 22 years at IBM, where I retired as a distinguished engineer. So to start our discussion, Carl, would you please share with our audience today your analytics journey in the many years you've been at Intel and how your role has evolved over that time?
Well, I have to be honest to say we didn't, while we started the decision engineering group, obviously being in business since the late 60s, there was lots of analytics happening at Intel before the decision engineering group started. You can't design products like we do or design manufacturing processes without some serious math. But the trajectory for us has been more and more showing advanced analytics for decision making, not just for the design process of designing the product or designing the manufacturing process or designing the factory, which all have lots of analytics in them, but applying analytics to decision processes. And obviously, given that trajectory that I just showed you, obviously, nothing succeeds like success. So as we have delivered these, our reputation has gone across the company. And since I'm a senior fellow, my responsibilities are across the company. We actually organizationally sit in the server group, but we build tools for the desktop guys, the laptop guys, the manufacturing folks, the supply chain folks, et cetera, et cetera. So just, but more and more projects with bigger and bigger impact on the company. Nothing succeeds like success.
Sounds great. So you want to you may have already answered this question, but what was the most challenging problem that you faced at Intel? And it doesn't have to be an analytics, it could be a organizational or business problem.
Yeah. Well, it's always. I've got we've been working from home for a year and a half, but if I project my brain back into my cubicle, on my whiteboard, I've always got a three circle bullseye. In the middle is the math. We've faced some hard math, but we can always figure out the math. Okay. The next ring is the data. Sometimes the data is hard to get. Data is power. So sometimes the people with the data don't actually want to give it to you. And sometimes when they give it to you, it's rubbish anyway, and you have to spend a lot of time cleaning it up. And sometimes it doesn't exist. We've certainly had projects that we started and found out that some crucial data wasn't available. So we continue to build the proof of concept to convince people, hey, if we had this data, look what we could do, and they start collecting it. But the outer circle is people. People are always the problem, and people in the sense of all the biases that Kahneman has shown us. Not invented here. We've always done it this way. Oh, we can't bet our job on your math. So getting over the hurdle with the people to get them off their spreadsheets onto some sophisticated math. But usually we can break through that. Last week we started on a new problem, and the people that we showed the proof of concept to, that we got a couple sample problems from, told us that it usually takes one of them a week with the spreadsheet to work out the answer. We demoed our proof of concept that gave him the answer in 18 seconds. Needless to say, they became much more interested in collaborating with us.
Interesting. So obviously you need senior level support in success. So could you talk a little bit about the impact and the commitment of the senior level management within Intel, and how has that made a difference in your success?
Well, I have to admit that's been more luck than sense. Getting hired by the vice president who ran manufacturing, who eventually worked up through the ranks to be the CEO of the company, was a very good move on my part. I didn't realize it at the time, but being invited into CEO staff to report out on the projects definitely helped us. Definitely helped us build our brand. And fortunately for me, we got invited into Barrett's CEO staff to report out on projects that were beneficial to the company, which meant other vice presidents called me up to say, "Hey, can you work on this problem?" et cetera, et cetera. So we've been, as I say, more luck than sense. So I'm fortunate to know, almost all the people on CEO staff and CFO staff, since again, all of our projects get evaluated into, how much did it cost? How much did it save us? How much more revenue, et cetera, et cetera. So 50 billion is a nice number to take into CFO staff.
Exactly. So let's focus now a little on the analytics organization itself. And it may be multiple organizations if you want to discuss that. Would you please share with our audience today your approach to building the organization? For example, are you hiring or growing talent internally or externally? And do you have any advice or tips on on how to best build an analytics organization?
Right. And that, I'll have to give you a 2 or 3 part answer to that, because it's certainly not the case that my 30 people are not the only people in the company doing analytics. I'll break it into two big pieces, and then I'll break one of the pieces down a little bit. The IT folks, of course, do advanced analytics. Mainly what the IT folks at Intel are interested in is there a commercial tool that they can buy to solve a decision problem with advanced analytics in the company? On the other hand, we're the folks who you can't buy a commercial tool. It's Intel's secret sauce, so we build the tool. So there's the distinction of, is it solvable with a commercial tool, or does it need a custom tool? And I'll break the custom tool part down into sort of an interesting circumstance. When I first joined the company, I actually sat in the factory automation group, and there was one row with about 10 of us in, and over the course of time, all 10 of those people are out in different parts of the company running an analytics group. So we all know each other because we used to all sit together. So again, there's one group in the process development part of the company. There's one group in the assembly part of the company. So we have found that the best way we can see to do these things is to embed the decision scientists in the business. It's really beneficial when we walk in to talk to some of our potential customers that we report up the same management chain. We get graded in the same promo and raises each year, et cetera, et cetera. So that makes the people problem a little easier, as opposed to, well, we sit in this ivory tower over here, and we're here to help you. It's like, well, okay, come on, you guys don't know beans about our business. The way that we populate those groups, we certainly hire people from inside the company. In a 110,000 person company, there are occasional people who have training in advanced analytics, but hired into a job that doesn't in Intel that doesn't allow them to really exercise all their skills. And then they find out there are these advanced analytics groups. So sometimes we move people over in the company. We certainly hire people from outside the company, but I've developed a very particular technique for hiring people outside the company. That technique is, I've been a research adjunct at Stanford, at North Carolina State, and in 3 different departments at ASU. So it's frequently the case that the person that we're hiring into one of our analytical positions is one of my master's or PhD students who I have worked with for a number of years. And in addition, we have an internship program. So I can bring graduate students in for 3 months or 6 months. We think of those as a long job interview. They get to look at us, we get to look at them. And in addition, I'm assuming a lot of people on the line have found the same thing. When we do university research, the easiest way to transfer the successful research from the university into the company is to hire the graduate student that did the work. Duh. So yeah, we have lots of different mechanisms inside the company. Sometimes we find people inside the company who are just missing one or two skills. So we hire them into the group and we send them off to the data analytics, data science programs at various universities that are being established these days, or my graduate students, or there are lots and lots of mechanisms.
Great answer. So by the way, we only have so far one question in the Q&A. So for those who are on the line, feel free to take a, you know, as you're hearing what we're discussing, maybe add a question there. That would be great.
Maybe there's only one person on the line.
Well, I happen to know there's more than 40.
Okay, good.
But anyway, it's a common challenge in large organizations, and Intel certainly is one, that working across boundaries, example, IT organizations, marketing, financial services, those are typically in different places. It's sometimes challenging, but at the same time, you have to, you know, collaborate, cooperate, build systems that are going to live maybe in some of those. So can you comment on how that maybe are providing some interesting experiences or stories and how you've been able to succeed in working across such boundaries?
Well, that's a really important part of what I try to do and what I try to get the group to do, because I'm assuming that lots of people on the line have to some degree the same problem we do. I remember when I was I can't remember as a sophomore or junior, as a math major in undergraduate school, one of the math courses was about problem decomposition, how to take a complicated problem. And there were always two criteria. The first criteria was you can take the complicated problem, break it into pieces you can solve. And then the second criteria is you can take those solutions and merge them back into the solution to the big problem. So I think the difficulty at Intel, and I'm assuming at most big companies, is we're really good at problem decomposition. The CEO has the problem called Intel, and he immediately breaks it into HR, finance, sales and marketing, manufacturing, product design, and manufacturing immediately breaks it into process development, process execution, et cetera, et cetera. We're not super duper good at pulling the pieces back together. We have lots of silos. So one of the things that we really try to do, because usually we're starting to build a tool in one of those silos, but we have access to lots of silos. We try really hard to build our tools so the silos get hooked together, at least, or optimally the silos get knocked down. But yeah, what you say is correct. Again, fortunately, I've been fortunate in the sequence of political things that have happened at Intel to be pretty much known to each of the business groups and the manufacturing guys. So after you work on after you break through and work on projects with each one of them, working on the next project is not such a hurdle. And it's frequently the case that we work on a project with group A, and they say, "Oh, now that you've solved that problem, we have another problem over here." So sort of a spreading activation, and well, and our divisions are quite competitive with each other. I remember early on in my career at Intel, we made some benefit at one factory. Okay, and I got calls from all the other factory managers, because in the factory meeting, it was like, "Hey, this factory's kicking your butts. What you better go find out what they're doing." So I was like, "Oh, okay."
Great answer, really great answer. Okay, here's an interesting question for you. How has the pandemic affected Intel as a company and your group in particular?
Well, I'm embarrassed to answer that question. As everybody on the line probably knows, everybody working from home has dramatically stimulated sales of laptops. And for every group of laptops that gets purchased, somebody has to buy a server. So I'm embarrassed to tell you that in the 2 years so far of the pandemic have been the most financially successful 2 years in the history of Intel. So we have benefited dramatically, unfortunately. In terms of my group, given that we work with Intel people pretty much around the world, we have factories across in the United States, but also in China, in Vietnam, in Israel, in Ireland, et cetera, et cetera. My folks were pretty much all set up to work from home because we have meetings early in the morning or late at night with our collaborators in China or in India or in Europe. So actually, if we had metrics on my group's performance by week for the last 5 years, you wouldn't be able to say, oh yeah, that right there is where the pandemic started. We've pretty much been hitting on all cylinders, but we are all very much looking forward to getting back into our building because it's really a team. We all really enjoy each other. So just getting to see each other in this mode of communication has allowed us to keep our high performance projects going. But our mental health is could go either way.
Okay, great answer. I have a couple more questions, but I think it's about time to transition to questions from the audience as the latter third of our time. And I'm going to start with, right in order. I may be able to go and find ones that are of similar type as we move along. But our first question is from Shiva Pathik. Could you share examples of prescriptive methods used in the industry?
Well, that's been an interesting progression for us. The initial work that we did in improving factory operation was very prescriptive. When the shift changed, and I should say our factories run 7/24, so there are 4 shifts of workers that have 12-hour shifts, the day and night of front end of the week and the day and night of back end of the week. And one of the first thing I started to work on was to notice, geez, each of the shifts runs differently. Each of the shifts has people with different heuristics in their heads as to how they should manage the whip, how they should manage the equipment maintenance. And so in that first case, we were very prescriptive. We said, okay, here are the steps in the decision policy that we expect you to execute at the beginning of the shift. And we're not going to grade you on how many things you got out of the machine, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to grade you on, did you follow the steps in the process? So it was, we moved from some of those things early on in manufacturing to being very prescriptive. Thou shalt do your decisions with these steps, and you will record the numbers that you computed, and we will check you and grade you on those. But over the course of time, got very much got away from prescriptive because people started to believe the advanced analytics could actually help them. So moving into now spending a lot of time intuition, analytics, decision support. How do we empower the folks with the intuition to apply the answer, their intuition to our optimal answer? And that let me add one more war story to that. I remember in the early days being at a Informs conference, and every so often I would have an academic come up and ask me at the end of one of my talks, is say, well, hold on, you claimed you implemented a linear program here, and then you let the business people do what ifs on it. Wow, the linear program gave you the provably optimal answer. Why do you let business people screw around with it? And my answer was always the same. Well, it gave me the optimal answer to the model I gave it. The model's incomplete. In fact, the model may be partly wrong. And the people with the business intuition know that I can't put into my mathematical model every nuance, okay, that they have in their business intuition. So it's interesting that we do optimization and then we let business people fool around with it and play what if games.
Very interesting. And of course, we've all experienced that. People that are out there in the real world that all see that, have that same experience. Here's a question from Irv Lustig. Always asks interesting questions.
Hey,
Have
Irv.
you had any projects that got funded and then ended up being a dead end or failure, where there ended up being no ROI or ROI that wasn't as much as expected?
Not in the sense of the financial part. I guess I've been really good at picking projects that bring big benefit to the company. But again, I have to admit, in an $80 billion company, you make a 1% improvement here or there, you're talking about some big numbers. So it's not difficult to make big money by improving decisions at Intel. But there have been three projects that come to mind that either the data was insufficient, we started it and found out that the data was not going to fly, or we found out that the customers were not going to be as collaborative as they needed to be for us to pull this off. I mean, well, let me digress and say the way that we pick our projects. Number one, what's the benefit to Intel? Number two, can we do it? Do we have the math? Number three, can we get the data? Number four, will the people who we need to collaborate with be good collaborators? I mean, when we go into one of these things, the people that we're building it for always understand the business problem way more than we do. And we understand the math toolbox that we bring way better than they do. So there's sort of a mating dance for us both to get up to speed. And I can think of two circumstances where the data just didn't support us solving the problem, and one where the mating dance didn't come out. They had time to come and ask us to help them with the problem, but they didn't have time to help us help them with the problem.
Very interesting. Okay, well, here's a question that follows up on your three concentric circle, which I thought was a great image, by the way, because we all try to understand how those pieces interact. But the question was from an anonymous attendee: do you work in the three circles inside out or outside in?
Well, yeah, actually, as I just described, sort of all together.
Yeah.
In picking the project and in developing the project, again, we worry about the benefit to Intel. Do we have the math? Do we have the data? Do we have the collaborators? And that's, I should mention that, as I said, today there are 32 people in the group, and we have 4 major areas we work in. So you see that we have fairly small teams, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, which means that that everybody, in some sense, I warn people when they want to join the group that if they do, they're going to have to wear lots of hats. They're going to have to worry about helping develop the math, helping get the data, interact with the customers. Our teams aren't, there's the business analyst, and there's the business analyst throws the functional spec over the wall to the software architect. We all sort of wear all the hats and really get involved in the project. So we as I say, we pretty much work on those in parallel, right? We need benefit to Intel. We can do the math. We got the data, and the collaborators will collaborate with those. Those sort of all have to be going on at the same time, or the project's not going to fly.
Well, and in fact, I think every single say methodology you see that talks about how to solve analytics problems or business problems, even in general, they're never linear, right?
Oh, heavens no.
They may look linear when you lay them out or you teach them in a course, but of course there's constant feedback and interaction. So I think I sort of intuited that answer, but I'm glad you filled it in.
Well, and actually, let me expand on that, because it goes out in time as well. My boss frequently asks me when I start up a new project is, well, okay, how long is this going to take? When are you going to be done? And my answer to my boss, he's getting a little tired of the answer, is As soon as the business stops changing, this decision support tool will be done. So our typical sequence is we focus on a problem. We go watch the people who are solving it now to understand, how did they think about it? Where do they get their data? Who did they report out their answer to? How did they, what information did they show? And then we come back and my math people get our heads together and figure out, how can we solve this? And then we get one of the software people in to cobble together a prototype, and we go back and show it to the customers. And if they like it, we expand it to what we think of as the minimal viable tool to get them to throw their spreadsheet away and use whatever we've given them. And then for a while, we run the tool with them looking over our shoulder. And then we transition to them running the tool with us looking over their shoulder. And then we transition to, here's our email address and our phone number. We'll see you in the next users group meeting. We have users group meetings with each of our tool folks, sometimes monthly, sometimes every other month, depends on the maturity of the tool and how fast the business is changing. But in my experience, it's almost always the case. If we deliver a decision support tool and then we disappear for 6 months, and then we go back and check on how are they doing, almost invariably they're back on a spreadsheet, because they say, well, this new business requirement came in and your tool doesn't do that, and we had to solve the problem. So, okay, we built a new spreadsheet. The business changes. At least our business changes all the time, for heaven's sakes. So it's frequently the case that we may meet with the customers, with our internal users, for a couple of years, okay, until either the business, that particular business slows down in its morphing, or we come up with the next better tool. But yeah, we're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, it's interesting. The job task analysis for the certification, the CAP certification,
Right,
has a section on life cycle. Your organization obviously has cracked the code on how to create that life cycle, so that the tool continues to be successful.
right.
That they maintain it and update it. I mean, that was amazing. That discussion you just provided.
Well, but let me embellish that even a little more. If you know that you're going to do continuous improvement on the tool for a long time, you architect it in a different way, right? And fortunately, I have the software folks who work in my group are absolutely better than world class. They're universe class. So it makes it lots easier to convince the people to collaborate with us and to keep the tool alive if there's no downtime. If the tool runs all the time, the customers tend to get really confident that this is a really good tool and these people know what they're doing. But you architect it, if you know you're going to modify it every 3 months, every 6 months, every 9 months, you architect it a different way than if you're going to deliver it. Okay, here it is, done. Bye. Good luck. Right.
Well, that approach is probably a definite loser, right? I mean, they're back to their spreadsheet.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Anyway, great answer. Great answer. I have another question here that brings us a little bit back to this whole idea of building the organizations. What advice do you have for a mid-level career person who might be trying to build an organization like yours at their own company? Obviously, I'm taking from this question that they don't have a very mature existing organization. They would love to build it. What would you recommend as those things to work on or steps to take?
Well, assuming that their company is like Intel, we're in business to make money. It takes a while to build up the group, but the only way I know to build up the group is to take on some hard problems and deliver the solution. I don't know any other way. I don't know any other way to build a group than figuring out what are the really hard problems you can solve and solving them. You got to build your brand. They're not going to, Well, I, I'll give you an example. I think within probably 3 months of joining Intel, I set up a meeting with Craig Barrett, my boss, and I walked into his conference room and he said, "Oh, let me guess, you need 3 more people." And I said, "Huh, wait a minute, did somebody share my foils with you? How do you know why I'm coming in here?" And he said, "Well, the last 427 people that walked into my private conference room were here to ask for more heads." He said, go make me some money and I'll give you some more heads.
Great lesson. Yeah, great lesson.
So the trick is to not be begging for resources. The trick is to be out shopping for where is the problem that is the most impactful to my company, that we have the math to do, that we have the data to do, that we have collaborators to do. And then when it's successful, advertise the snot out of it.
Great advice. Great advice.
I don't know. I've never seen any other. I'd be interested to see if, as we do these meetings more and more, if somebody has grown a group without delivering the goods.
Yeah, I'm sure no one's done that.
Yeah,
so,
and that's a tough path, right? To take on a really hard problem and deliver solutions when it's you and one other person is like, good heavens, that's a tough road. But it's the only road there is, only road that I know of.
So here's another question from Robin Lugie, who asks, can Carl speak to how Intel views supports continuing education and professional technical development for the analytics team?
Yes, I can speak to that. Every year in my budget that's always been granted, I have a line item for classes and conferences. So everybody in my group has budget to do one class or one conference a year. And given that some people don't use that budget, some people get 2 classes or 2 conferences a year, because from my seat, and everybody in the group agrees, the math, the analytics is developing so fast. The software tools are developing so fast. If you're sitting still, you're losing ground. So I don't, how shall I say, I don't mandate that my people take classes and go to conferences, but they understand that I am strongly suggesting that they go do that. So for example, we've had multiple people who are Intel employees go to Stanford to get a certificate in data science. We, a lot more, I always have to, there's sort of a standing rule at Intel that, we don't send any more than 2 people to the same conference. Well, I send a whole bunch of my people to Inform's conferences, and I let the finance people beat up on me. I'm fine. So yeah, for me, it's a requirement. It's a requirement to be in my group. If you don't want to learn, if you don't want to go hear what other people are doing at conferences, or learning new techniques by taking a university class, or there are lots of classes online. Some are free, some are. If you're not willing to do that, you're going to have trouble. You're going to have trouble with me.
Great.
And sometimes, and again, let me add a caveat that just came up the other day, because one of the guys in my group said, "Hey, do you mind if I go take a machine learning class? I'm not actually working on a machine learning projects at the moment, but I sure would like to take a class." My response to him is, of course. If you don't take a machine learning class, how would you recognize a machine learning problem if it hits you in the head? So it doesn't necessarily always have to be, oh, we need this skill for this project. You need to go to, okay. You need to be as skillful as you possibly can be to work in my group.
You're describing an awesome place to work. There may be time for one more question. This is from Dave Lejeune. With our world's recent challenges with supply chain, I was curious if other analytics groups within Intel have platforms that are able to monitor, at times predict and adjust or optimize to market changes.
Well, to a degree, yes. I don't think any of our embedded advanced analytics group predicted the virus was coming. Although I have over the last 10 years heard lots of TED talks about the inevitability of pandemics. But probably the best group at that at Intel are the folks who sit in supply chain world. They have a really strong agent-based supply chain model that they can play out all sorts of catastrophes. I remember they did a great job a few years ago when there was the Los Angeles dock strike. So yeah, I think I answered that by saying we occasionally do scenario planning, right? If you've read the scenario planning book from Royal Dutch Shell, you're not trying to predict the future. You're just trying to get yourself off of the, well, here's our plan and we're going to execute it come hell or high water. Get you off of that to think, well, there are options and we've thought through some of the options. So when something goes wrong, oh yeah, we thought through those. So yeah, we try to do that. But with my math hat on, hardest problem I can think of is predicting the future.
So we are actually at the end of our hour, and we've left a number of questions yet to be answered. Beth, can you record these questions? Can you get a copy of them? So maybe maybe if Carl has a little bit of time, he can respond to some of them.
Yeah, that's fine.
Beth, are you able to do that?
It won't be immediate, but it'll happen at some point.
Okay, so well, Beth will. She just said she can try to record these, and we'll see if we can't either post them or find a way to get them out. Many of these people, I think, are people that we both know.
All right.
So I want to, for everybody who's on the call, I want to thank you for your time, for your really thoughtful, insightful input and comments. And as always, since we've been talking at meetings for, it's more than a decade, it's always informative and fun to chat with you. And I hope all those on the call had the same experience that I did.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay, so long, everybody.
Okay, bye for now.